Max Verstappen just terrified the entire Formula One paddock in a Mercedes. In freezing temperatures, with hail crashing onto the Nürburgring, fires on track, and complete chaos everywhere, Verstappen climbed into a Mercedes GT3 car and immediately qualified third against elite endurance racing specialists. And then something happened that made this story explode. Toto Wolff showed up. Not at a Formula One circuit. Not for a Mercedes race weekend. He flew to the green hell to watch Max Verstappen. And suddenly, one question started spreading through the paddock faster than anybody expected. What if this is no longer just a guest appearance? Because this was not normal qualifying. A Porsche burst into flames mid-session. Another car slammed into it. Yellow flags destroyed laps everywhere. Drivers were fighting snow, rain, hail, freezing temperatures, and a half-wet Nürburgring at more than 200 km per hour. Most drivers struggled to survive the conditions. Verstappen attacked them. An 8-minute 18 around the green hell. Third fastest overall. On day one. That should not happen this quickly. Especially at the Nürburgring. This circuit destroys confidence. It humiliates experienced drivers. It punishes one tiny mistake harder than almost any track in motorsport. And somehow, Verstappen already looks comfortable there. But here is the part almost nobody is ready for yet. The most important qualifying session has not even started. And if Verstappen delivers one perfect lap tomorrow in full attack mode, this entire weekend could become far bigger than endurance racing itself. What makes this story so shocking is not just the lap time. It is how quickly Verstappen looked like he belonged there. Because the Nürburgring is not a track where drivers can fake confidence. This place exposes weakness instantly. One corner feels dry. The next feels like ice. One mistake does not ruin a lap here. It can destroy an entire car. And on the very first official day of running, the circuit already turned into complete chaos. The temperature dropped to around 8 degrees Celsius. Parts of the track were still wet. Other sections were drying unevenly. That might not sound dramatic at first. But for drivers, it is a nightmare. Imagine trying to sprint at full speed while the ground constantly changes beneath your feet. That is what the Nürburgring felt like. Then came the incident that changed the entire session. A Porsche caught fire in the Schumacher section of the circuit. Another Porsche slammed into it moments later. Yellow flags appeared everywhere. Slow zones interrupted fast laps. Drivers suddenly had no idea where they could push and where they needed to back off. The session became survival mode almost instantly. And this is where Verstappen started impressing people inside the paddock. Because while everybody else was reacting to the chaos, he looked calm. Completely calm. In fact, Verstappen was the very first driver from his team to head onto the circuit. That matters more than most fans realize. Drivers normally wait in dangerous conditions. They want more grip, more information, more confidence. Verstappen wanted none of that. He wanted the green hell immediately. That tells you something important about his mentality this weekend. He did not arrive thinking about participation. He arrived thinking about performance. At first, his lap times looked controlled. Then suddenly, everything changed. After an early installation lap, Verstappen unleashed an 8-minute 18.539 around the Nordschleife. That lap immediately launched the Mercedes into the fight near the very top of the standings. Third place overall. And here is why that shocked experienced endurance racing teams. The Nürburgring is more than 25 kilometers long. One lap feels endless. Drivers spend minutes memorizing bumps, braking points, curbs, elevation changes, wet patches, and blind corners that arrive at terrifying speed. Most GT drivers need years to truly master this circuit. Years. Yet Verstappen immediately looked competitive against specialists who have dedicated massive parts of their careers to endurance racing. That should make the rest of the field uncomfortable. Because this is not Formula One anymore. GT3 cars behave completely differently. They are heavier. They move more aggressively over bumps. They slide differently. Drivers constantly fight weight transfer and tire behavior. Imagine switching from a fighter jet to a heavyweight muscle car during a snowstorm. Most Formula One drivers would struggle badly with that transition. Verstappen looked natural almost instantly. And this is where the atmosphere around the Nürburgring began changing completely. Because suddenly, this stopped feeling like a fun side project. This started feeling serious. Very serious. Especially once reports emerged that Toto Wolff was flying to the Nürburgring to watch Verstappen in person. And at that moment, the entire story became bigger than endurance racing itself. And this is where the entire weekend started feeling uncomfortable for Red Bull. Because every lap Verstappen completed in that Mercedes GT3 car created a picture Formula One fans never expected to see look so natural. Max Verstappen succeeding inside a Mercedes. Not struggling. Not adapting slowly. Succeeding immediately. And the scary part is that the Nürburgring is one of the worst possible places to fake speed. This circuit exposes drivers brutally. You cannot hide behind strategy here. You cannot hide behind tire tricks. You cannot hide behind clean air. The green hell forces drivers to reveal exactly how good they really are. And Verstappen looked terrifyingly comfortable. Especially when conditions became worse. Later in the session, rain intensified and hail started falling over the circuit. Some drivers stayed inside the pits because the risk became too high. That decision makes sense. The Nürburgring in mixed weather feels almost impossible. Drivers race through forests with visibility constantly changing. Some corners remain wet while others suddenly dry. Temperatures shift across different sections of the circuit. Imagine driving on black ice while somebody randomly turns the lights off every few seconds. That is basically what drivers were fighting. And yet Verstappen still looked calm inside the chaos. That calmness matters. Because endurance racing is not just about speed. It is psychological survival. Drivers must manage traffic, weather, fatigue, pressure, and concentration for hours. One small mistake can destroy an entire day. And this is where Verstappen started shocking people outside Formula 1. Not because of raw pace. Because of how complete he suddenly looked. His feedback inside the car looked sharp. His confidence looked natural. His rhythm looked controlled. That is why Mercedes paying attention here becomes fascinating. Because Toto Wolff is not flying to the Nürburgring just to admire lap times. He is studying something deeper. Pressure handling. Adaptation speed. Communication. Mental control. And maybe most importantly, hunger. Because after years of winning in Formula 1, many champions eventually lose that edge. That obsession. That need to prove themselves somewhere dangerous again. Verstappen looks like he still has it. Actually, he looks energized by this challenge. And that changes the entire feeling around his future. Because this no longer feels like a driver casually trying another category. It feels like a champion searching for something bigger. Especially once people inside the paddock started realizing what comes next. Night driving. And this is where the Nürburgring becomes truly terrifying. Once the sun disappears, the Nordschleife transforms completely. Brake markers vanish. Visual references disappear. Huge parts of the circuit become almost completely dark except for the headlights of the cars. Drivers are basically racing through a black forest at more than 200 kilometers per hour. And for Verstappen, this weekend marks his first real nighttime preparation around the green hell in serious race conditions. That is a massive challenge. Because nighttime endurance racing exposes concentration like nothing else in motorsport. You cannot rely on instinct alone anymore. You need patience, awareness, discipline. And maybe this is the most important detail of the entire weekend. Verstappen is not treating this experience like practice. Before the event, the message from his side was brutally simple. Success means winning, not learning, not participating. Winning. That mentality changes everything for the rest of the field. Because now the established GT teams understand one dangerous reality. Max Verstappen is not visiting the Nürburgring. He is trying to conquer it. And now the pressure becomes enormous. Because Friday is no longer about proving whether Verstappen belongs here. He already proved that. Now the question is far more dangerous. Can he actually take pole position at the Nürburgring against the best GT teams in the world? And this is where the story becomes brutal for the rest of the paddock. Thursday's qualifying result did not even decide the real starting order for the GT3 field. The real battle comes during top qualifying. One driver. One attack lap. No traffic excuses. No strategy hiding weaknesses. Just pure commitment around one of the hardest circuits on Earth. And according to expectations inside the paddock, Verstappen is highly likely to be the driver chosen for the final decisive session. That possibility changes the atmosphere completely. Because now everybody is imagining the same thing. Cold air over the forest. 300,000 fans surrounding the green hell. And Max Verstappen launching a full qualifying attack in a Mercedes. That is the kind of image motorsport never forgets. Especially because the competition is serious. BMW looked extremely fast. The row cars stayed near the front. Porsche remained dangerous with the legendary Manthey entry. Audi still hovered close enough to punish mistakes instantly. This is not a weak field. These are elite endurance racing organizations with years of Nürburgring experience. And somehow, Verstappen arrived and immediately became one of the main threats. That should scare everybody. Because the terrifying part is that conditions may actually improve for him. Thursday's freezing temperatures created extremely difficult grip conditions. The asphalt stayed cold. The tires struggled to fully switch on. Drivers constantly fought unpredictable balance. But if temperatures rise on Friday, everything changes. Grip increases. Confidence rises. The circuit becomes faster. And that creates one frightening possibility. What if Verstappen has not even shown the true pace of the Mercedes yet? Because his 8-minute 18 happened during chaos. Yellow flags interrupted laps. Slow zones destroyed rhythm. Rain and hail complicated the final part of the session. Yet he still finished near the very top. That tells rival teams something deeply uncomfortable. If Verstappen gets one clean lap in proper conditions, he could become almost impossible to beat. And maybe Toto Wolff realizes that better than anyone else. Because from the outside, this looks like a GT racing success story. But underneath, something bigger is forming. Formula One politics. Future possibilities. Psychological pressure on Red Bull. And maybe even a glimpse of what motorsport could look like after Formula One eventually changes around Verstappen. Because this weekend is revealing something important. Max Verstappen does not look limited to one category. He looks like the type of driver who could dominate anywhere. Formula One, GT racing, endurance racing, the Nürburgring. And drivers like that almost never exist. That is why the paddock reaction feels so intense right now. People are realizing this may not be a temporary experiment. This could be the beginning of a much bigger Verstappen story. One that stretches far beyond Formula One itself. And if he delivers something special during top qualifying, the entire conversation around his future could explode overnight. But maybe the biggest shock of this entire weekend is not the lap time. It is the feeling growing around the Nürburgring right now. The feeling that Verstappen does not look like a Formula One driver visiting another category. He looks like he belongs here permanently. And that realization is starting to change how people inside motorsport view him completely. Because the Nürburgring exposes something deeper than speed. Character. Patience. Instinct. Mental endurance. This circuit breaks confidence faster than almost any track in the world. One bad moment stays in a driver's head for hours. One tiny mistake can destroy an entire race. And Verstappen keeps looking emotionally untouched by the pressure. That is rare. Especially when the entire event is becoming centered around him. More than 300,000 spectators are expected across the weekend. Fans flooded viewing areas trying to catch even a glimpse of Verstappen's Mercedes. Reports claimed race officials already had to introduce special measures because the crowds around Verstappen became difficult to control. Think about that for a second. This is not Formula One. This is endurance racing. And yet one driver instantly became the center of the entire event. That level of presence changes everything around a paddock. Teams feel it. Drivers feel it. Manufacturers feel it. Especially Mercedes. Because every camera following Verstappen around the Nürburgring creates another uncomfortable image for Red Bull. Max Verstappen succeeding in silver. And the terrifying part is how easy the partnership already looks. No tension. No awkwardness. No visible adaptation problems. Just performance. That is what makes Toto Wolff's presence feel so important. Because whether people admit it or not, Formula One is always watching body language. How drivers interact with engineers. How relaxed they look in garages. How naturally they fit inside different teams. And Verstappen already looks strangely comfortable in this environment. That creates questions. Dangerous questions. Especially because Verstappen's future beyond 2026 remains one of the biggest subjects in Formula One. And weekends like this only increase the noise around Mercedes. But here is where the story becomes even more fascinating. The Nürburgring is not rewarding Verstappen with an easy introduction. It is testing him brutally. Cold weather. Mixed grip. Rain. Hail. Crashes. Night driving preparation. This is almost the hardest possible way to learn endurance racing. And somehow, he keeps responding like somebody who has done this for years. That is why rival teams are becoming uncomfortable. Because usually, drivers need time before they become genuine threats at the Nürburgring. They must learn traffic patterns, night references, tire management, fuel rhythm, mental pacing. Verstappen already looks ahead of schedule. Far ahead. And now the weekend is building toward the most important moment of all. Top qualifying. One lap. One chance. One mistake away from disaster. Or one perfect lap away from creating one of the most iconic qualifying performances the Nürburgring has seen in years. And honestly, the pressure could not be bigger. Because if Verstappen takes pole in a Mercedes at the green hell while Toto Wolff watches from the paddock, the conversation around this weekend changes forever. At that point, this stops being a cool endurance racing story. It becomes a statement. A warning. Maybe even a preview of something Formula One is not ready for yet. And that is exactly why the entire motorsport world is suddenly paying attention to every single lap he drives.